story is as follows. Let's begin at the beginning. I have another booklet. I should send it to you. And that is basically, life has a beginning, a middle, not an end, but an eternity. So in order to understand Moshiach, you really have to go to the beginning, because the end and the beginning are always the same thing, right? There's a famous concept in Hasidus Kabbalah, I think we've spoken about it a few times, which is that Noach Tchiloson b'Seifon and Seifon b'Tchiloson, that the end and the beginning are both interconnected. And so if you want to understand reality, you have to understand the beginning, you have to understand the cause. So for example, if I'm going to go make a house, you have to understand why I'm making the house. It's not enough to say, okay, I'm going to build the house because I'm a contractor and I build homes. So somebody that has a brain would go over to the guy who's hiring him and say, okay, what kind of house do you want? You want a comfortable house? You want a functional house? This bedroom, that bedroom, what's your preference? How do you like it? In other words, you're dealing with an emotional reality. You're not dealing really with a physical reality. Everything in reality is really, it's not about physical shape. It's about, they call it surah and chomer. There's the matter of it, right? We're all basically made up of the same matter. It's a bunch of electrons floating around. But then there is the surah, there's the form, there's the purpose, there's the individuality. So obviously life is not about our physical matter. If life was about physical matter, then, you know, a galaxy which has more physical, the biggest galaxy would matter most. And yet the biggest galaxy to us is like a little star. We hardly even see it. So what matters is the ultimate purpose of life. And so Mashiach is the ultimate purpose of life. Now, then the next question is, what exactly is Mashiach? And one sec. Steve, sorry, we lost you there. Huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to contact you.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. It just fell off. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get it. Thanks.
No problem. So we're actually discussing a bit about Mashiach.
I was listening to John's question shortly after it when I fell off, and I would be quite interested in that too, because it seems to me you have really described a physical return, not a spiritual one, but it's both a spiritual and a physical. It's not just one or the other. So I would be happy to listen. I'm putting you back on mute. The poetry reading is over, so we're good.
Okay. So what I was saying is that if you want to understand something, you have to go to the essence. You have to go to the core. You have to go to the why. And so the question of life is, why did Hashem make it? And the why is always the original intent. So once you understand the original intent, we gave an example of, let's say you have, you're building a house. So you have to understand why the person wants a house. You know, is this a beach house? Is this going to be an office? You know, the why matters. Because once you know the why, then you design the how around the why. So life has three stages. It has the original intention, which is fulfilled in the Mashiach times. And everything up to the Mashiach times is a build-up to that. Okay, so first of all, let's clarify a couple of things, which is what exactly is going to happen when Mashiach comes. So again, as Dr. Simon just mentioned, it's both a physical transformation as well as a spiritual transformation. And so the story is that let me just see, I think I have an article on this that maybe I can just read the article. Hold on one second. Called Moshiach Explains. Okay, so this is a very short article, but it's pretty succinct and it's worth sharing. I'm going to read it to you. Exile. The universe has two basic time periods. One, the period of exile. Two, the period of redemption. By understanding what exile is, we understand what redemption is. Exile is nothing more and nothing less than an unnatural state. When the world was created, man and woman were completely taken care of by God in the Garden of Eden, where primarily the delights were spiritual. In this pristine state, Adam had a desire to taste the physical. According to Kabbalah, Eve understood it was God's intent for man to fall, for reasons we will explain later. And so she orchestrated the eating of the forbidden fruit. Adam had his taste, and the world we know today was born. No longer would there be a free lunch. By the sweat of your brow you will eat. God cursed man. Childbirth will be painful. God cursed woman. Most importantly, as the sages teach us, the presence of God actually felt within this world was removed into higher worlds. In other words, the natural state of reality is one where the presence of God is felt, heard, and experienced. However, God, understanding human nature, desired something loftier than a handout. If I were to give you $1 million, you might be excited. But if you were to earn it by the sweat of your brow, as when a child comes after 9 months of labor, then you will appreciate it. So in exile, we have a new reality, one in which evil entered into consciousness of man, for all that man desires, caused by Adam's self-serving act as opposed to selfless desires, creates a self-justification for the attainment of the pleasure. And thereby, shortly thereafter, we find jealousy, murder, until the world descends into total chaos and a great deluge flood wipes out humanity, save a few precious souls. For another 500 years or so, things don't properly improve until Abraham rediscovers God, rejecting the paganism and cult worship of his time, and then God begins his spiritual descent back into the world so we can experience his presence. At the giving of the Torah, 10 Commandments, the Jewish people as well as the Egyptians who came out of Egypt joining the free ride experienced God, saw how his reality is the only real reality and all others are superimposed. Then this high was lost at the sinning of the golden calf that the Egyptians convinced the Jews in, having feared that Moses abandoned them, because again, it was not a spiritual high that God was after, for all is designed by God, both the high and the mistake that causes the fall, rather the labor of man to bring about the Messianic age and utopian era of redemption. To do this, the Jews had to enter into the real world, conquering Israel, setting up 2 holy temples after 300 and some years of the Mishkan tabernacle, and eventually take their precious values of peace, justice, charity, and harmony into the rest of humanity. Suffering extraordinary persecution by those forces that seek power above peace, that seek prestige above love, that seek totalitarianism above justice, for example, Nazis, Arabs. And through their spilled blood, the nations in whose midst they lived would come to realize their own foolishness and change their ways. After 2,000 years of wandering, after a Holocaust that laid bare once and for all that conquest is evil, that murder reprehensible, and hence the Jewish values of peace, justice, charity, and harmony were seared into the Gentile world, perhaps excluding the Arabs, not only assist the Nazis, but continue to be belligerent. This was at least before the Arab Spring when I wrote the article. It is in this paradigm of peace, justice, charity, and harmony that the Messiah will find a ready audience. Redemption. So this is stage number 2. So redemption is getting back to the natural state of reality whereby God's presence will be seen, felt, and experienced. The redemption will come about, heralded, if you will, through a Messiah, a man born of flesh and blood. In the words of Maimonides, the only Jewish codifier based on Jewish sources of how to identify the Messiah, if a king will arise from the house of David, who diligently contemplates the Torah and observes its mitzvahs, as prescribed by the written law and the oral law, as David his ancestor, will compel all Israel to walk in the way of the Torah and rectify the breaches in its observance, and fight the wars of God, we may with assurance consider him Moshiach. If he succeeds in the above, builds the temple in its place, and gathers the dispersed of Israel, he is definitely the Moshiach. He will then improve the entire world, motivating all the nations to serve God together. As Zephaniah 3:9 states, I will transform the people to a pure language, that they all will call upon the name of God and serve him with one purpose. In other words, the Jewish belief has always been that there are two stages. The first is when the Messiah builds his credentials in the reality of today, and the second is when he heralds in the redemption of tomorrow. One of the primary differences between the two parallel redemptions, namely that from Egypt and of the soon-to-be messianic one, is the nature of the audience. In other words, when the Jews were in Egypt, all they really knew was that they were Jews. Culturally, even religiously, they were idol-worshipping Egyptians. In contrast to this, the world today is far more defined, far more unique, far more certain, far more Jewish, meaning the values of justice, peace, charity, and harmony than ever before. So this is a very simple, but very, very succinct and very profound concept. So the audience has changed. In other words, sometimes I look at the world like, what is Mashiach? Mashiach is, let's say, a stage. So for play to unfold, two things have to happen. Number one, you need the actors, and number two, you need the audience. And they both have to be ready to do their part. So Hashem could at any time bring Moshiach, but the question is the audience ready? What are people looking for? It's not enough to have a reality in which Hashem reveals himself. Very nice, he did that. But there was a beautiful looking fruit, and Adam said, you know what, the fruit looks good. I mean, it's more sophisticated than that, but the essence of it is the same, whether it's drugs, whether it's recognition, whatever the addiction is. In other words, he himself hadn't gotten to the place that he wanted to be an audience. When the Jews got the Torah, they were already audience on one level. In other words, when the Jews got the Torah, they said Nasa v'nishma. So we've said this many times, and according to mysticism, there are differences in where souls come from. And the Jewish soul comes from the essence of Hashem. So it contains great, in a way, infinite understanding. And that's why Jews, even secular Jews, they're very passionate, very idealistic, very charitable, because there's something in them that makes them realize that, something's wrong with injustice, right? There are many people, look, there are many good Gentiles. However, when we look at the stats, we look at the numbers, the amount of organizations, idealistic organizations in the world, I would say, I'm not an expert, but probably 25% of them are run by Jews. I know when I was in South Africa, a rabbi spoke, and he just spoke about the organizations in South Africa that helped the blacks. I think most of them were run by Jews. So, in other words, you're talking about a unique soul, but this soul is put into the world, and we don't realize our soul. The Maharal of Prague, who is a very, very great Kabbalist, Tanya is one of the books is based on him. So he says the Jew is almost like a unique category. My brother, who studied a lot of psychology, Levi, he told me that the psychologist, a Gentile, said, he categorized all people in 160 categories. And I was a genius. But he said the one group of people that can never be categorized is the Jewish people. We don't fit in a box. And so that doesn't mean that we don't come with our limitations and our own shtick, but it means that there's something in us that can rise beyond all limitation. And so the story of Mount Sinai is a very important step towards Mashiach. And it's only a step. Our sages teach us that getting the Torah was the engagement. Mashiach is the marriage. So we all know that there's a major difference, at least in a healthy society, between engagement and marriage. You know, you're living separately. It's a different reality. So basically, if we look at it, that the audience had to be ready. So what does it mean for the audience to be ready? It means that the people have to want Hashem. Now, when we were in exile in Egypt, so there was obviously a part of the Jewish people who probably saw this is wrong, this is not good. Then Hashem redeems them. They're like, yay, this is right, let's do it. But in a certain sense, it was superficial, meaning their own convictions. This is what's very commonly, it's spoken about a lot. We haven't really dealt with that much in the past couple of Maimarim, but those of you who've been with the class longer have heard the concept more. There's a major difference between the love of the tzaddik and the love of the Baal Shuvah. And just to give an example of this, there was once, I don't remember the exact details, but maybe it was the Mittler Rebbe or the Tzemach Tzedek. He had a dream, maybe the Rebbe Marash. Anyway, and the Tzemach Tzedek said to him, I believe you had a dream. Tell me your dream. So he said, in the dream, he saw a tall man who was on a raft. And he had like a paddle standing on this, like in the olden days, they would send down logs down the river, for timber, big business. And he was sort of, moving his little raft, right, left, whatever. Then he saw another guy that was, he was like in rapids. He was also, I think, on a raft, but he was in rapids and it was very turbulent waters. So the Rebbe, who's telling the other one, who later becomes the Rebbe, he says, the first person you saw was the Maggid of Mizrich. The Maggid of Mizrich was the teacher. He was the Rebbe after the Baal Shem Tov. So the Maggid, he taught, he had 60 tzaddikim. So all of Hasidus, right? In a way, we all know the Baal Shem Tov is the founder of the Hasidic movement. But if you want to call, in a way, perhaps the establisher of the Hasidic movement is the Maggid of Mizrich. And I've had the privilege of learning a lot of his writings, extraordinary. But what's very interesting about the Maggid is that whereas the Baal Shem Tov was very much a man of the people, the Maggid, though he wasn't kind of, God forbid, in any way against the people, but he was a teacher of the tzaddikim. And you look at his writings, many of his writings, they're written for tzaddikim. They're written on a very, very extraordinary, high level. So the job of a teacher of tzaddikim is like you're going on a raft. These are all very, very, very willing disciples, right? Imagine you're teaching, even right now, you're teaching adults. So you're teaching people, they're interested. But imagine you're teaching kindergarten. It's a different ball game. It's chaos. So you have to have extraordinary abilities to be a teacher in kindergarten. It's a whole new story. Now, that was the job of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe really brought, this is the beginning of the revelation of Mashiach. So again, Mashiach encompasses, very interesting. The Rebbe speaks, there are many amazing midrashim, things that will happen when Mashiach comes. Says that, Israel will give out pastries. Walking down the street, you'll find a nice Danish coming out of the ground. There'll be diamonds like dust. So, and these are real things. They will really happen. So the question is, who needs diamonds like dust and who needs donuts? And are they gluten-free in any event? So the answer is, so Mashiach is a perfect reality. And in a perfect reality, you have all blessings. It's not limited to spiritual blessings. It's everything. Financial, physical, things taste good. We have love. We have friendship. We're not even going to the Beis HaMikdash and all the other amazing things, but it's just purely from a physical perspective. Some of the physical things that we know will happen. There'll be a resurrection of all the past Jewish dead and the good Gentiles. There will be, clouds are going to come and they're going to take us to Israel, us, or synagogues, if I understand correctly. I think even the synagogues of the past, perhaps even homes of the past, basically we're going to basically be one big family in Israel. It speaks about a meal which God will slaughter the Leviathan, this giant sea monster, and he'll make a sukkah, he'll make a tent from its skin, which all Jews will be in that meal. So you have to imagine, and I find it interesting, the fact that now, all faiths basically have had to shut down their synagogues, lahavdil, the other ones. It's almost like God is getting us ready for the new, I don't want to call it new religion, because to us it won't be a new religion, but for the new style. Once upon a time, when we Jews lived in Israel, so if you think about the first temple era, because the second temple, the Jews were already more dispersed, but the first temple era, literally every single Jew was living in Israel. King Solomon built a holy temple. It was a little bit like a messianic era. Ishtachas Gafne, Ishtachas Teinosei. Everybody had everything they needed. There was tremendous prosperity. Israel was a superpower. And we're heading in that direction now. I mean, I just saw yesterday Mike Pompeo coming to Israel. You just see kind of the humility and with the world, the way it's going on. Netanyahu's receiving a lot of respect because, he's managing things well. So it's like, it's a paradigm of basically a utopiistic paradigm. But the thing is that utopia is not chicken. You can have all the chicken in the world, it ain't going to make you happy for very long. And so utopia has to do with our relationships. Everything in this world is about integration and combination. And so it's about interpersonal relationships. It's about our intrapersonal relationship, our relationship with ourselves. And of course, it's about our divine relationship. And we all have these three relationships. By the way, I did this little interview with a friend of mine. He's a very bright guy. He's actually an MD, but he's a psychologist. And we were speaking a little bit about the coronavirus and, positive motivation. So he said something really interesting to me, that Viktor Frankl said that we all need three goals. We need some kind of physical goal, whether it's work, or whether it's home, even, gardening, but a person has to be kind of active in something. Then you need, and certainly when Moshiach comes, we will be very active in positive goals, whether it's teaching Torah. It speaks about 2,000 Gentiles coming to every Jew. What are they going to want from you? Chicken soup? No, they can make their own chicken soup. They're going to want Torah. Then I believe also, it's interesting that I heard this. I haven't seen this, so I can't verify it. But I heard that the Rebbe said, what will doctors do when Mashiach comes? Everyone's going to get better. He says they're going to teach people how to kind of live healthy. In other words, there will be space. The Rebbe was very into the concept that we all have meaning and purpose. Everybody has value. But he even speaks about that like from every woman, the smallest will be like an entire nation. So she's going to be quite a mother. So in other words, we our infinite value, whatever our purpose, our soul is. I have a friend of mine, very bright, Yid, actually from Ukraine, and special Yid. So anyway, so I was schmoozing with him. So he's become Chabad over the past couple of years, but this concept of discovering what your purpose is, that's a big thing. Mashiach will reveal to you your specific mission. I can't say I know my specific mission. I think maybe it has to do with maybe teaching Chassidus. But I can't say for sure. I don't know for sure. Do you know your specific mission? Okay, you probably, all of us are a little bit older, so we probably have some inkling into our mission. But we can't say for sure. There was something, I think part of the reason that, let's say, a lot of times Chabad rabbis kind of have a sense of joy to have a clarity of their mission. There was a guy, he wrote a book, 9.5 Mystics. He was a Reform rabbi, actually eventually became, I think, Chabad, but a very interesting book. It's actually quite a worthwhile book. And he calls himself half a mystic, but one of the people he interviews is the Rebbe. So so he says to the Rebbe, he says, I think Chabad people, like he was very intuitive, you get these very bright people. So he was just seeing, you're walking down Crown Heights. He says, I see they look very naive. So the Rebbe said to him something very, very profound. He says, something tells me you don't sleep well at night. He said, because you're torn between two worlds. You're torn between the world of secularism and the world of religion. And you don't know who you are. But these people, they don't have, he called it a keta, they don't have a split. This is their reality. This is what they believe. So when a person has that clarity, it does a tremendous thing for the psyche. I know who I am. I know what I have to do. Simple. So Moshiach is going to help us in a way. Now, it's very important to understand, and John, you've mentioned this before, that life has to be challenging. If you don't have challenge, one of the great lines, profound line from the Rebbe, he says, the sign of life is growth and creativity. You think about a child. They're always growing and they're always creative. What makes kind of someone in the adult category? They're stopped growing and they're not creative. So growth and creativity, you have certain people. There was once there was a group of people. It was a fund. People would give like 20,000 towards the Rebbe's mitzvahs and things like that. So it was called the Machne Yisrael Fund. The Rebbe would speak to them like twice a year. And I think on one of the flyers, the Rebbe probably wasn't involved in the day-to-day, but one of the flyers, they wrote that the Rebbe is, even though he's an old man, he's active. And the Rebbe said something very profound, extraordinarily profound. He said, I'm not old because I'm innovative. And again, the Rebbe wasn't saying it with arrogance, and I'm not saying he used the exact words, but the content is correct. In other words, when every day you're thinking about a new possibility, and when you're interested, when you want to learn, when you want to change the world. I've got this Facebook friend, Sally Ganner. The guy's like over 90, and he's reinvented himself. I mean, he's a little bit stuck in his apartment, but this is what he does every day. He has a mission to tell people about the Holocaust. He's posting on Facebook. So the guy's alive, meaning he has hope, he has joy, he has creativity, he has sorrow, he has passion. So he's alive. So life, which is growth, which is creativity, which is challenge, which is meaning, which is giving, which I don't know if it's loss as well. I don't think we necessarily have loss when Mashiach comes, but I don't want to go too deep into it. But the point is, Mashiach is not going to take away responsibility from us. If anything, there's a famous story that a guy ends up in hell. It happens. And this guy was a Breslover chassid. So he calls out, the Breslover chassid knows what to do. He says, Reb Nachman! So Reb Nachman looks down and he sees his chassid's in hell. So he bends down and he's got langa payas, he has long payas. He schleps him out of hell by his payas. So there's a Lubavitcher in hell. He says, hey, work for him, it can work for me. So he says, Rebbe! And the Rebbe looks down and he gives him $1 bill and he says, good luck on your mission. So the Rebbe had, another time, there was a guy, the Rebbe was complaining to someone in Yechidus. So the Rebbe's public persona was very, very sweet and always kind of inspirational. But when it came to kind of individuals, I think certain individuals who he respected or had or he expected a lot from, sometimes he would be very open and frank with them and complain to them. So the Rebbe was complaining that, some other Hasidic group, the Rebbe sent them out to Israel. For example, there was a very great man, the Kloisenberger Rebbe. This individual, Shem, unfortunately lost, I think, a wife and 11 children in the Holocaust. He went out, he built a hospital in Israel, very amazing, built communities, very, very powerful leaders, powerful individuals. There's a story, I actually heard the story from somebody that was there at the time, an amazing story. So, anyway, I don't want to be too long, but I don't want to be too lengthy. So, I'll just say the story very quickly. So the story is that there's a time in the Torah, I don't know if is it Bechukaisa? No, I'm not sure. Maybe that's Chanon. There's twice that we read curses. When do we read the curses? There's, I think, Parshas Chanon, maybe in Bechukaisa as well. Anybody know when there's twice in the Torah these curses, which are not nice. In any event, so the tradition is that the reader is kind of says it in an undertone. So this guy was there, Rabbi Riskin, and the Kloisenberger Rebbe says to him, read it loud. So now that like goes against Jewish tradition, you know. This is a story. My father told me the story. It's a great story. Rabbi Yonason Eibschitz, he was a great rabbi, and he was connected to, he was friendly maybe with a bishop. You know, the bishops in those days actually had a lot of power. So they were discussing, like, you know, which religion is true, this and that. So Rabbi Yonason Eibschitz said to him, look, if you tell your people, I don't know, you change the religion, you tell them, I don't know, we made a mistake, you know, instead of eating the wafer, you got to eat cookies. Would they do it? He said, yeah, absolutely, they'll all do it. He says, I can't change my religion. He said, what do you mean? You can tell your people anything. He says, come to shul this Shabbos, dressed up, and you'll see what happens. So he comes to shul, and Yonason Eibschitz announces, guys, the parsha is a different parsha. They all go ballistic. What do you mean a different parsha? It's Parshas Bahar. Forget about it. He has no power. So he tries maybe with the Haftarah. That's it. It says in the book, this is the Haftarah. So the guy realizes it's true, you know. The rabbi, he's just, at the most, he can say what the law is, but it's black and white. Anyway, so getting back to the story, so it's a very big thing. It's like the rabbi in the synagogue going against the tradition. So the guy, but he was a very powerful figure, the Kloisenberg. He shouts at him, read it loud. Then he said that, you know, these are the curses. Hashem needs to hear that all these curses came to us already. He was a survivor. Already happened. And he says, guys, we're going to Israel, you know, and he moves his community to Eretz Yisrael. Anyway, so the bottom line is that, I get into this, that I was saying. The point is that we have these physical blessings, and then there's the spiritual, there's the audience. Let's just go back to this point of the audience. So the thing of life is that really what runs a human being, quite interestingly, is desire, right? So if I want something, I mean, let's say, God forbid, somebody's an addict. What makes them an addict? They want to be an addict. And even though there's a part of them that maybe doesn't want to be an addict, but the part of them that wants to be an addict is the stronger desire. So desire is what runs us. So in order for us to want God, we have to have a desire for God. Now, like we were saying in the last mimer, that there are the innate desires within us. There are certain tendencies, right? We all desire love. But that doesn't mean that something else can't become a stronger desire at this moment. Maybe right now, I want to be an actor. I'm willing to give up, family for acting. So it's not that I don't like family. It's just that my desire for acting has superseded my desire for family. So for Hashem to make the world ready for a relationship with Him, for a spiritual yeah, this is what we were speaking about before, the idea of we all have purpose, right? We all have something we have to do. And Moshiach is going to give us our purpose. He's going, not give us our purpose. We already have a purpose, but he'll certainly help reveal our purpose. He'll certainly clarify it, but the work will be ours. Life won't be, meaning that the life is really a spirit thing, right? When two people, we're talking to each other. So who's talking to who? I don't see you, you don't see me. But there's a spirit. Your spirit is listening to my spirit. The content is a spirit. It resonates with your spirit, with your content, with what rings true to you. So it's spirit to spirit. And the same thing is when Mashiach comes, there will be, the basic notion of people, of spirit to spirit. We're saying about Viktor Frankl, so he was also saying about things to do, and also about interpersonal relations, and also a spiritual relationship. So all these things are necessary in life. And in the times of Mashiach, they'll be at the best way possible. But the thing is that you don't want to take someone, we gave a story yesterday, of the wagon driver who goes to heaven, but he has no desire for heaven, the real heaven. So they stick him in his heaven, and he's a wagon driver till today. So the point of the matter is that the big part of the story or of a relationship, and a relationship's a very good example of it. So you have two people. I don't know, you have Mark and Malcolm. And they're both looking to get married. They both want to have a relationship. But the relationship can't just happen. They have to get to know each other. They have to get to like each other. They obviously have to trust each other. They have to fall in love with each other. They have to have values. They have to be kind to each other. It's the only way it's going to work. It can't work in any other way. And so these things take time. A relationship is not something that you can automatically, a truth can be said. I can tell you E equals MC squared. But a relationship, for you to have a relationship with E equals MC squared, I'd have to explain it to you. I'd have to make it meaningful to you. You would have to want it. You would have to buy into it. And so there's a very big part of reality which is not about the truth. It's about the seeking of truth. And so Hashem, if you think about the technical steps that had to go in to create a world in which people would have, Norman, he should have a nice refuah shlema, but he said, he's a bright guy, he was part of our community, so he said a good line to me. He says, you know why the world begins in the Garden of Eden? Because in order, it's like Maslow's hierarchy, in order to be a human, you have to live in the Garden of Eden. In other words, if your issues are, I don't know, God forbid, stress over food or stress over this, you just don't have the mental space to, I was thinking about a good way of describing this morning. It's all about what do you care about, right? So if you are, God forbid, in deprivation, so you care about, I don't know, getting out of this hunger or something like that. So you don't have the place in you to care about the meaning of life. So that's why Maslow's hierarchy is very useful, because you need certain things in place even for what we're doing now. You have to have a roof over your head, you have to have water, you have to have some food, you have to have some sense of security. You have to have these things. You can't function rationally. You don't have space in your head to think without these things. I marvel at people like the Rambam. The Rambam, he had to run away from the crazy Almohad tribe that conquered Spain, decided they had to kill the Jews. But yet, during these times, he was able to compose books. These were extraordinary people. These are not normal people. A normal person has to have safety, security, basics. And then, ironically, you also have to kind of have predilections as well. You have to indulge yourself. King Solomon writes, we were speaking about him the other day, that he writes towards the end of his life, he writes a book, Koheles. You read Koheles, it's like a major depressive manual. Everything is useless. The animal's going to die. The human's going to die. Nothing changes under the sun. Everybody does the same thing. It's all a bunch of garbage. But he comes up with the end. By the way, end of the day, Saif Dover, Kol Nishma, Selikim Yiravis, Mitzvah Shmar. At the end of the day, everybody pay attention, listen to God, do his mitzvahs. Kizeh Kol Adam. This is the whole purpose of man. But in order to come to that realization, how does he begin his book? He says, I was a king in Israel, and one of the things I thought about is I'll indulge myself. And I didn't hold back any pleasure. So if you do that, what do you realize? It's just a bunch of garbage. Because every pleasure, if you have it enough, it's meaningless. And that's why, ironically, I think, I lived in Africa for many years, so I saw this very clearly. Poor Africans are much happier than even the wealthier whites or blacks in Africa, and certainly Americans. Why are they happier? I think one of the reasons is because they think that money will make them happy. So they have hope at least. But the people that have enough money to sustain themselves, and they're not like, God forbid, so poor that they think that money is the solution to all problems, so they know money is not going to make them happy because they have enough. I mean, okay, a little more would be sweet or whatever, but it's not going to make me happy. So often what happens to these people is they get depressed, or they're not depressed. They become a little anxious. They're like, okay, so what will make me happy? Because we all want to, in a certain sense, even higher than the desire. We said before, we want desire as the primary thing we have. But even higher than desire is pleasure. Because why do we want a desire? Because it's going to give us a pleasure. In a way, even the desire to get away from pain is based on pleasure. Because I want pleasure, I don't want pain. So desire is all connected to pleasure. But what happens is there's a rule. And the rule is, tainug tamidi einoi tainug. A constant pleasure is no pleasure. Right? So I may like ice cream. I happen to like ice cream very much. But I'm certain if every single day, breakfast, lunch, and supper, I had ice cream, it wouldn't take me more than a week, and I'd be sick of it. Even somebody that liked any pleasure you can imagine. There's a guy that he was a counselor in addiction. He had struggled with addiction. He pretty much beat it. He was a counselor. He told me that putting on tefillin feels better than the best drug. Something special that he feels when he puts on tefillin. And ironically, when people have drugs, what are they addicted to? They're addicted not so much to the current pleasure, but when they first took the drug, there was a very big high. And this is my theory. My theory is that actually when they first took the drug, what happened was, it was the first time they were happy. They were suffering, they were in pain, and it took them out of pain. So they say the greatest things that are most addictive, and they say nicotine is the most addictive, it's not so much the pleasure that it gives you, but it's that initial contrast between your first state and the hit. And so what the person is really looking for is they're looking for that original pleasure. But of course, they can't get it. And that's the nature of the addiction. So what happens is when a person gets sick of the addiction, that's really rock bottom. In other words, now they want to change. That's the key. The key is the person who's seeking truth. The key is the person, and I think to a large extent we are unique because as Jews, you should know, we have a very interesting history with the Torah. We have like a love-hate relationship with it. Why? Because God made us a minority. And as a minority, there's always this kind of looking out at the majority and thinking, well, those people, they seem to have it good, right? The first time the Jews wanted a king. So what did they come? They came to Shmuel Hanavi and they said, we want to be like everyone else. They have a king. So what does Shmuel the prophet say to them? I'll rephrase it. You're a bunch of morons. The king's going to take your daughters. He's going to take your sons as his soldiers. He's going to turn you into servants. You want a king? And yet they say, yeah, we want a king, because in their kind of mind, where they were up to, because why do we have desires? Because we're not really that, we're feeling a little bored and we want something more. So we look at it. Rome seems amazing. They've got a king, and they've got a beautiful arches and columns. Why can't we be like the Romans, right? Now, you don't understand that the Romans are servants of their king. You have it good. You're free people. But in your head, they have it good. You don't appreciate freedom. We know now that freedom is lost because people don't appreciate its blessing. Countries, empires that create civilizations, such as the Greeks, right? They had a democracy. So when did they fall? They fall because people stop appreciating the value of their freedom. We have it today with all the crazy leftists, which basically they want to invite a totalitarian state because they don't understand, they don't appreciate freedom. So to them, yeah, it makes sense. Let's give everybody this, let's give everybody that. Of course, why not? Because in their kind of lack of sense of reality, it makes a lot of sense to them. Why not? So the fact of the matter is that the Jewish people, we've gone through a 3,300 year, that's a long time, relationship with Hashem. We've been in a relationship for 3,300 years. There's no Jew who's ambivalent about God. They've got opinions, one way or the other. So the point is that there were times in our life that being a minority, and not so long ago, to our own ancestors, in Europe, that's where we all come from. So we had a situation that, of course, Jews are quite intelligent, and this mirrored itself in many different times of our history in many different ways. It's the same story. The story is that sometimes you get a Gentile civilization that is prosperous, and because it's prosperous, it looks good. It happened to the Jews in Egypt, happened to the Jews in Israel, let's say vis-a-vis some other countries. It happened to the Jews in Spain. It happened to the Jews in Europe. Right? Nobody wants to imitate a bunch of losers. But suddenly, let's say the German Jews, they look at Germany. It was a prosperous place. It's scientific. Never mind the fact that the Jews themselves are not usually the ones that make it prosperous. They don't realize that. But the fact is, there was a study, by the way, just to confirm what I'm saying, in Czechoslovakia. After the war, the economy collapsed. And they did an economic study. And they realized 100 Jews were responsible for the economy of Czechoslovakia. I've seen that very clearly in South Africa. The Jewish company, and South Africa is the kind of economic hub of the entire Africa. Most of those companies, the powerhouses, one Jew, for example, owns 3,000 companies. So the financial institutions, these things that, really they're sources of investment, and I don't know, I don't want to sound biased, but just from my pure perspective, and I lived there for many years, from what I see, 90% of them are Jewish. And so the point is that, like the Baal Shem Tov says, every country, and maybe it was more in those days, every country needs the Jews and spits on the Jews. So economically, the Jews were very much part of it, but it's not so seen because, the country is doing well and it's all doing well. So then people say, okay, so why should I be Jewish? Why should I be a Torah Jew? I'll be a good German, And the point of the matter is that that notion of let's join, in a certain sense, the way it translates into modern society, is let's join the liberal movement, right? Because in a way, Germany was a liberal movement. That's what it was. It was a liberal state. And it became fascist, but the fascism was towards liberal people. And basically there's this predilection of what happens. Very interesting. By Jonathan Sachs wrote about this. A couple of people, they made a history of the whole world. These are geniuses. And what they say is what happens to civilizations is that, let's say Greek is a good example. There's certain things, usually religion, that makes the society work, right? The laws and the kind of value system of the society is what makes the society function. But then what happens is, as the society is functioning and people take the function for granted, so what happens is now they become liberals. So the question is, why do they become liberals? And this is a very interesting thing, because this is based on something that Rabbi Marash said, a very fascinating thing, which is actually what it really is sexual predilection. In other words, they have a subconscious desire not to follow morality, the rules. Maybe in certain things they don't mind, they don't mind paying a tax or this and that because it keeps them safe. But they don't like the fact that there are standards of sexual behavior. And that's why there's a very powerful correlation in also civilizations between liberalism and bizarre, basically perversion. And so therefore, what happens is this desire, again, people don't really think, or at least desires create an addiction. And in the addiction, the person doesn't think. So the person doesn't realize why he thinks what he thinks. Rabbi Marash said, if you were to castrate all the liberals, none of them would have any of their philosophies. In other words, sometimes it's an addiction, right? I remember a friend of mine who once went to the Brooklyn Library, and so unfortunately he was into marijuana. So he was busy reading about legalization of marijuana. So you think he cares about the legalization of marijuana? No, he wants marijuana, and all of his philosophies have nothing to do with what's legal, what's not legal. It has to do with one thing. It has to do with his pleasure instinct. His entire philosophical reality would have disappeared if instead of marijuana feeling good, it would feel bad. He wouldn't care a stitch about the legalization of marijuana. So the point is that in order to get us to the state of Baal Tshuva, and this is something that's very important to understand, the Alter Rebbe was working with Baalei Tshuva. The goal of life, Hashem made us into Baalei Tshuva. What's a Baal Tshuva? A Baal Tshuva literally means a master of return. In other words, Hashem wants us, from our own perspective, to seek the truth. That's it. All he wants is us to seek the truth. Because he is the truth. The truth is Torah. The truth is beautiful. Einstein said, we don't know the truth of the old boss, but when we find it, I'm sure it will be both simple and beautiful, which it is. But the point is, in order to want it, in order to believe it, you have to want it. And ironically, in order to want it, you need a world that I don't know if I can say we had, but a world that we have. I think we're transitioning very quickly to Moshiach. Why? Because you needed a world that gave people freedom. If you repress people, then behind them, their repression is taking over. Their philosophies are based on their repressed desires. But if you don't repress people, and you let them be totally free, so what eventually happens is that they seek truth, because all these Meshagasin, all these crazy ideas, and all, let's call it the sexual revolution, the 60s, all these things, they didn't make people happy. They did not give people the peace that they were looking for. So it forces you to think deeper about life, and it forces you to say, okay, so what is truth? If that's not going to make me happy, because again, pleasure is a primary instinct of the body. It's probably the primary instinct of the body is pleasure and not pain. So, and then if a person's bored, they're seeking pleasure. So then the question is, what is going to give me, what is the truth? What is the meaning? What is the purpose of this existence? And that's where the turn happens. And my belief is, and I think statistics, prove this right, is that this transformation, this Baal Tshuva level, has already occurred. The fact that we're here on this conversation, we could be doing anything. You know, there's an entire internet of movies and videos, you name it, it's there. But here we are. All of you are intelligent people. You've all been to university, whatever, have your degrees, successful in your own right. But we're learning Torah. Why are we learning Torah? Because we enjoy it, because it's meaningful, because it's purposeful, because it's the only thing that has real value, real meaning. Why are we doing what we're doing? Because it's meaningful, because it's purposeful, because it's the only thing that's really meaningful. But we're not the only ones in this. You know, in Israel today, there are, I would estimate, at least 1 million Bali Tshuva, 1 million Jews who have turned to God, right? They all grew up like us. There are around the world, and the Gentiles. I mean, in China, I was amazed to read this a while ago, maybe more, but 40 million Christians. So it's an atheistic society. But again, people are looking for meaning. And so even though obviously to us that's not very meaningful, but relative to nothing, it was something, right? All these other religions, they've taken something out of Judaism. So there's something there. So the point is that even the evangelical movement, which is what, 80 million Americans, those also, they were secular people. They were born again, this and that. So the point is, New Age, I saw a statistic a while ago, 40 million people. So you talk about massive numbers of society, even though maybe we're humble, but there was a book, a major book written with, by Jim Clifton, the CEO of Gallup. And so he basically writes that major polls around the world, 84% of the world believes in a higher power. 84% of the world. So it's a massive, we're not talking small numbers, we're talking major numbers. Okay, some of them you can say they were educated that way, maybe they're not Bali Tshuva. But I would say the majority of people growing up in secular societies, which is perhaps 1 billion people, their connection to God is a very personal connection. And this is what the statistics show, that even though more people are leaving organized religion, more people are becoming spiritual. And that's where really it's at. It's at that, and that is Moshiach. Moshiach is the marriage. Moshiach is where you and God develop a dance. And that's a beautiful thing. And that is what I would say the essence of Moshiach. Everything in the world has an essence and has an expression. And so the essence of Moshiach, God's home, the whole idea of the world, is this. We're in it right now. The Rebbe has said our times are the times of Moshiach. Because if you're looking at it from the essence point of view, and the essence can never be seen, because the essence is spirit to spirit. There is no visual on the essence, right? God says, you've never seen me. There's no visual on God, because it's just spirit. It's essence. It's who he is and who you are and what you're looking for, what he's looking for. And, it's like I said, Mark and Malka, they're both looking to get married, and they find each other, and they love each other, and they think they're good for each other, and they're building a home together. That's what it is. Now, the expression of Mashiach will be expressed in very, very beautiful ways. It says that Hashem ketz som lachoshe. He created a ketz. Now, the word ketz is a very, very important word. Ketz means end. That if Hashem wanted to, we could be in our little exile reality forever. Now, it's my belief that this period of time that we're in is a transition between the old world order and the new world order. And Hashem is going to be creating a reality which is so beyond the human imagination that it takes almost they say you can't just put the light on, you can't go from complete darkness to complete light. That's why Hashem, in his greatness and his kindness, every evening, every morning, what does he do? He transitions the light. There's sunlight, there's sunbreak, there's sunset. So in other words, Hashem transitions the reality from one reality to another reality. And we are transitioning. So let me talk to you what I believe is going to happen on the physical level with Mashiach. Okay, so let's summarize this. Hashem first had a desire. Desire was to unite with us. He made the world. He needed that we should seek him. In order to seek him, we had to go through everything we went through. And we had to look for him. And most of the world, I think, is there already. And now we're coming into the Messianic era. So what's going to be in the Messianic era? Messianic era, we're going to have many, many, many wonderful, beautiful miracles. You know, we mentioned a couple of them before, but just a couple of them that we didn't mention is the fact that the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, is built in the sky. Very interesting. It speaks about that the Beis HaMikdash in the future will have a rooftop with 3 triangles. And Rashi, quite amazingly, very few times he does this, he says, I don't know like what this is. Like I don't understand this. And if you look at 770, it has a rooftop with 3 triangles. We believe that the Beis HaMikdash, this is based on all the sources and stuff, I'm just giving you the bottom line, the Beis HaMikdash will first come to 770. The holy synagogue of the final Rebbe, which the Rebbe contains the Shekhinah, the divine presence, and that's where it goes to. It says wherever kind of the Rebbe, the generation was, the Shekhinah went with. So the Shekhinah went to that location. And therefore the Beis HaMikdash will come there. And then there will be a resurrection. Certainly the tzaddikim will first get up. Speaks about a dance where they'll all dance around the Moshiach, or Hashem will be in the center of the circle. And we have to understand this is not just a Jewish story, because the whole world is waiting for Mashiach. As the Rambam said, Christianity and Islam was to pave the way. When Mashiach comes, they're going to say, there's a prophecy that says, Sheker hinchilu lahem avasem, our ancestors inherited us a lie. But it's not really going to matter, because they'll be so happy that Mashiach is here. Certainly today they'll be very happy that Mashiach is here. So the point is that the world has been primed, and Hashem, and again, you know, we're all souls. You know, this kind of a shigas, we're all one. We're not all one. We're all similar, but we're all different. We're all unique. We're all special. And so therefore, Hashem has a mission for the Jews, and he has a mission for the Gentiles. We have different missions. And so each soul has already been put into its place. You know, after Mashiach comes, people can't convert. Everybody would want to convert. So every soul, whatever you've done, let's say somebody converted, that person was really a Jew, and they meant to come into everything that happened, everything already happened. And so when Mashiach comes, whoever was meant to be, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever they are, it's happened already. The stage has been set. And Mashiach is going to come, and the whole world, I mean, can you imagine? The news cycle will completely change. We believe that everybody will get better. There won't be any illness. First, the blind will be healed. We're talking about, we mentioned already, clouds taking us, our possessions, whatever, to Israel. So it's something so extraordinary. It's so beyond human imagination that you can't even imagine it. However, what I do believe will happen is things will settle down. The Rebbe speaks about we're going to have a celebration. We're going to have Yomim Tovim. Celebrations to remember the coming of Mashiach. Just like we have Yomim Tovim, we remember going out of Egypt, we remember the coming of Mashiach. And there'll be massive celebrations. It says all the fast days will turn to holidays. So in other words, as things settle down, right? So now you have a new normal. Let's say the new normal is that we're all in Israel. There's a holy temple. You can walk into a cloud. It takes you to the holy temple. You have the Torah on a whole new level. I don't know, you got visual. But certain things remain, certain things are so real, meaning they're the very essence of reality. And those things will never change. For example, consciousness, life, interaction, growth, love, kindness, purpose. All these things remain. And so these things just get elevated, meaning not only do they get elevated, we can always elevate, we can always grow. So these things are life. That's life itself. They're now, they're then, but then everything will be in a perfect, beautiful way. So that's my little summary about Mashiach. And we are now going to go to questions and answers. Amen. Yes.